I knew I had something. I titled the song You Can Dance and the show Song and Dance. It was about, what else? A songwriter and a dancer. The title remained for several years until I passed a Times Square record store and saw an import album of a show called Song and Dance. I was heartbroken. The show would have to have another title. It would also have to have a book. This was still a lark, so I decided to try my hand at book writing. Day after day at Catch, I would be writing scenes and putting reservation callers on hold until I either finished the scene or got caught by the owner. I was finally fired. I continued performing at various clubs and met a new girl named Vicky, whom I stayed with for almost 2 years. She taught drama to the deaf and was interested in my musical, asking to read what I had with the possibility of co-writing it with me. The connection with my old lover was a bit much for her, and the collaboration idea was dropped very quickly. In the meantime, the song Late Night Comic was having a life of its own. It was submitted to a director, Miriam Fond, who accepted it for a review entitled You Won't Find That Here, which debuted May 5, 1978, and was sung by Melinda Tanner. Shortly thereafter, the late Jerry Lang mentioned to his friend Kay Ballard that he had heard a great new song. She listened to a tape and immediately put it in her nightclub act, also performing it on several television shows. Eddie Bradford wrote the first arrangement of the song for Kay, and she performed it on The Merv Griffin Show on August 14, 1978. When I saw John Peters, then involved with Barbra Streisand, on the panel, I thought Barbra would be calling immediately. Dream on! Nevertheless, it was still a thrill. Somewhere during this time, I heard that Kay did a version with Sid Caesar in Las Vegas. If this is indeed true, I only wish I could have seen it. On September 4th, she appeared on the Jerry Lewis Telethon. I'll never forget her performance on that show when she said, "This is for you, Brian." A comic at the club, Glenn Hirsch, kidded me for weeks. Every time I would run into him, he would say, "This is for you, Brian." Kay's dedication to the song led to its inclusion in her engagement in 1979 at Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater in Jupiter, Florida. She gave me a special credit in the program. A videotape exists of that performance, after which she was asked to do a syndicated TV special. An entire scene was written around Late Night Comic. It was taped in 1980, and I eagerly awaited its broadcast. It never arrived. It seems there were money problems, and the show was canned. Years later, I finally got a copy of it. Perhaps it will air someday, but I'm not holding my breath. A true believer in my music, Mark Malamed, produced and directed a review called Remember These in February of 1980. He loved the song and decided it would fit in. Mark coached a lot of singers, and Laurie Mosier, who performed the song, was one of them. There was no pay designated for the use of my song. After all, it was only a showcase. Also in 1980, the improvisation was having a 17th anniversary and thought an album of their performers might be a nice touch, and maybe a nice buck when sold at the bar. I allowed them to tape me live with the house band and fellow performers doing Late Night Comic. It came out rather nicely and is probably still available somewhere for a nice buck. An odd request came in 1981 from a writer by the name of Bruce Dobler, who was working on a book to be titled Laugh Lines. He had also heard the song, probably through the album, and wanted to use a section of it for his book. I never saw a copy. In 1982, I got another call, this time from a young actor named Gershon Resnick, who had somehow heard the song and wanted to use it for his one-man show. It was not a musical, but rather a strange play he had named after my song. My demo of the song was played in the background. The only version I ever saw of this was in a loft somewhere in Soho on July 23, 1982, in 90-degree weather. There was no air conditioning, making it a very unpleasant experience, and of course there was no pay involved. It was performed again as a work in progress at the Raft Theater on West 42nd Street in February 1983. Somewhere around that time, I was desperate for some studio time. I called one of my first publishers and earliest believers, David Lucas, a top jingle writer, who had a studio. He said I should come by and play him some of my new songs. He had published my songs when I was 16 and always had faith in me. He loved my new songs, and so did his girlfriend, who was a filmmaker at NYU at the time. She was doing a short film for her class about comics. Guess what would fit in perfectly? They had me do a piano version of Late Night Comic, but with 3 lead vocals in unison. David was amazed. He couldn't believe how exact the vocals were. I wish I had a copy of that tape, and especially the film. Meanwhile, my musical was still on hold and probably would still be if it were not for a chance meeting with my idol's agent.